And hello and welcome back to game analysis 4 of the of 60 my most memorable games by Bobby Fischer. This game was played in Argentina, the Mar del Plata, Argentina tournament in 1959. This game was played between an Argentine grandmaster, Herman Pilnik, and an American grandmaster, Robert James Bobby Fischer. And Herman Pilnik is an Argentine grandmaster. He played for grandmaster national team, chess team, and also he won many international chess tournament. And yes, indeed, he is a very strong grandmaster. And in this game, it appeared to be like in previous game analysis 3. It appeared to be a drawish game, but Bobby Fischer managed to take advantage of the inaccuracy made by Herman Pilnik. And anyway, without any further ado, we start the game. Pilnik with the white pieces and Fischer with the black pieces. Pilnik start with e4, and Bobby Fischer replies with the Sicilian defense c5, knight to f3, d6, d4, the Sicilian defense, c takes d4, knight takes d4, knight to f6, knight to c3, and a3, and a6, taking away this square, taking away the b5 square from the knight, and also preparing to push the e5 pawn. Okay, and then next, bishop to e2, and e5 as planned, knight to b3, retreating, and bishop to e7, and castle here. And there is an option other than castling. White can play bishop to g5, but then later castling, knight to d2, knight takes on e4, bishop takes e4, knight takes c3, bishop takes on the queen, knight takes on the queen, bishop to e7, attacking the rook, rook to e8, knight to c4, knight takes on b2, knight b6, rook takes on the bishop, knight takes on a, knight takes on the rook, knight to e4, long castling, rook to d7. And this turned out an equal endgame. An equal game for both players. So that's why bishop to g5 was not played, but instead Pilnik white plays castling here, and then black replies with castle, and bishop to e3, bishop to e6, f3, queen to c7 was played, and queen to e1. Queen to e1 is not really a good move, but it is a good move. But queen to e1, actually preparing queen to f2, which will doubling up on the bishop here, and also add a further how do you call it, further control on the b6 square. So knight b to d7, rook to d1, and then b5, and here actually f4. Oh, no, instead of rook to d1, f4, instead of rook to d1, f4 can actually prevent the pawn to be pushed to b5. And then, well, anyway, however, if that was ever played, then d5 is actually quite strong. So that's why b5 and rook to d2, and here instead of rook to d2, a3 is actually quite a useful move because it prevents d4. But here black can play knight to b6, actually forcing the threat here, because there is no better move for white, and queen takes on b6 is check. So here, instead of playing that, rook d2 was played, and knight to b6, queen to f2 as planned, and rook a to b8, And here actually a better move would be knight to c4, infiltrating the position. But here rook a to b8 is actually a slow move. It's not a bad move, but it is a slow move, while knight to c4 is actually a perfect move at this position. And this also forces bishop takes on c4, b takes on c4, bishop to b6, attacking the queen, and then queen to c8, knight to a5, knight to d7, attacking the bishop over here, and knight to d5, and bishop takes on the knight, rook takes on the knight, and rook to b8 with double attack on the bishop over here. And also black has a superior position, because here after the bishop move, let's say to e3, then rook can take on the b2 and winning a pawn, which is very important. And return to the game with rook a to b8, and bishop takes on b6 was played here, and rook takes on b6, knight to d5, forking the queen and the rook, but that's okay because knight can take on d5, and e takes on d5, bishop to d7, running away from the attack, and f4 start to break open the center. Fischer ignores this by playing bishop to f6, and here if you play f5, it's actually open up the black defense. If play f5 and then c3, bishop to f6, only now bishop to f6, and but it already opened up the position, because let's say if f takes on e5 ever happen, and d takes on e5, and this opened up, yes, and this make a very strong pass pawn on the d file. And if bishop takes on the e5, that knight to d4 is actually very strong. And back to the game, bishop to f6. Oh, and why is knight to d4 is very strong? Because knight to b4, the knight can come to the e6 and c6 square, which is a very good outpost for the knight. And now we're back to the game with bishop to f6 instead of f5, and c5 by white. Rook b to b8, f takes on f takes on e5, bishop takes on e5, and if d takes on e5, again this creates a strong pass pawn on the d file. So bishop takes on e5, and knight to d4, trying to get into this square, or maybe this square in the future if the f pawn ever push, and g6, and a3 by white, with the idea to push b4, but you cannot push it yet because this pawn is under attack by the queen. So just preparing the move, and now g6, a3, and a5, king to h7, because you see before this queen and the king is in the same diagonal, and if bishop can ever come to here, then it will be a big problem for white. So just to be safe, king to h1, b4, c takes on b4, and a takes on b4, and rook to c2. And here is quite interesting one. What happened if bishop to f3? I mean, it is a possibility. I mean, this one is a more direct approach to what Pilnik is planning. And rook to c2, attacking the queen. Queen to b6, knight to c6, attacking the rook over here. But Fischer ignores this by playing b takes on a3. And what if, oh, and here white just straight queen, And what happens if knight takes on b3? If knight takes on b3, queen takes on f2 first, taking the queen, and rook takes on f2, and a2 is very strong because there is almost nothing can stop this pawn from queening. So now rook back to f1, bishop to f3, attacking the rook. And also, if the rook move, after the rook move, then the bishop can block over here, blocking the defense of the rook to on the a1 square. And also, if the rook ever move from this file, maybe somewhere along this file, and then the bishop can take on b2. So here rook c to c1, and only now rook takes on b8. So queen on takes on b6. So rook takes on queen, and bishop to and b. Rook takes on queen, and b takes a3. Rook to a8, attacking the lone pawn over here, and knight takes on the e5. Trading knight takes on the and knight takes bishop on the e5. And here another complicated position. Let's say if white try to protect the pawn, this pawn, a3 pawn, and black can simply go to rook to b2. And if rook takes, bishop to a5, trying to go here with check and picking up the bishop, but this will not work because rook takes on a3, knight takes on knight check, knight to e7 check, king can run away, and after another check, king to e8, protecting the bishop, defending the bishop, rook to e1 check. And this is a better course of action for white. So knight takes on e5, d takes on d5, and rooks to c3, rook to b2, rook to c7, attacking the bishop over here. I mean, trying to threat the bishop. This is actually a desperate attempt to go for a counterplay by black, because a better would be bishop to c4, preventing the rook from coming to the a2 square, getting behind the pass pawn. And this would be met with king to g7, moving away from the last rank, d6, f5, strengthening the pawn structure over there, and bishop to b5, attacking the rook. Rook can simply come to a6, and there is no saving this bishop right now. And instead of rook to c7, the white can also play bishop to f3, also trying to defend the d5. This also less working, because now again f5, strengthening the pawn structure. Rook to c7, attacking the bishop, and here black have bishop to b5, attacking the rook over here. If rook to e1 and e4, basically there is no good square for the bishop to go except for the d1 square, which is a very passive for the bishop. So that's why rook to c7 was played. This is actually the best move white can do right now. And bishop to f5, g4, try to kick away the bishop, bishop to e4, improving the position bit by bit, and bishop to f3, blocking, and also defending the pawn, the d5 pawn, bishop to e3, attacking the rook, attacking this rook, d5, trying to also again try to create a counterplay. If, for example, rook to e1 was played, then e4 is strong once again, limiting the bishop, make it into passivity. Bishop to g2, and rook to d8, attacking the pawn, the d5 pawn. Again, this pawn there's no one to defend it and very vulnerable. Rooks to c5, trying to defend the pawn, and king to g7. And slowly but surely will the king come here and maybe here to pick up the pawn over here. That is one possibility. And king to g1, because this is an endgame, you want your king to be as active as possible. And f5, strengthening the pawn structure, g5, and now black has two pass pawn, and this will be nearly impossible to be stopped. d5 and king to f6, again merging toward the pawn over here and take it sooner or later. So that's why d6 was played. There is nothing better white can do. And rook to d8, rook to e1. And why not taking on the rook here? If bishop takes the rook, then actually white is winning here. I mean, not winning. It will create a better chance to draw, because now bishop can take on a8 and white is perfectly fine. So that's why rook to d8 was played, moving away from the bishop attacks. Anyway, rook to e1, rook takes on d6, winning a pawn, and rook takes on d5. It's basically trading the pawn. And in this position, there is, instead of playing rook to d4, there is a better move which is e4. And here, if black takes the pawn and rook can comes to rook can comes to b1, and after trading happens, bishop to e4 check, king to g1, bishop takes on the b1, and here black up the material, up one bishop. However, rook to d6 was played, and rook takes on e5, rook to f6, attacking the bishop. And there is actually no good way to defend the bishop, because if you move the bishop away, then let's see you move the bishop to g2, and the rook can come to bishop rook can come to b1, checking the what do you call it, checking the king. And there is only one move, or maybe two. I mean, you can prolong by going to rook to c1, rook to e1, but bishop to b1, and this will be met with rook to f2, blocking the defend over here. And if the king move, and simply rook takes on f1, checkmate. Anyway, so rook to e3, the only best defense to defend this bishop. Okay, it was here, and now rook to e3, and simply just rook takes on the f3. Rook takes on f3, and bishop to e4, pinning the rook and the king. Rook takes on f7, trying to check trying to have a perpetual check. However, this is not working, because rook to f2, a very good move, which ends the game almost immediately. However, Pilnik tries rook to f8 check, king to g7, rook to f7 check. And in this position, this is the position where Pilnik resigned the game, because there is nothing to do, and because king can escape to h6, and there will be no more check for white. And as this rook cannot be moved, soon it will fall after rook can takes on f3, or bishop takes on f3, depending on what white plays. And other than rook to f7 check, there is also rook to f4, which will prolong the game, but it will be met with bishop to d5. And if, for example, bishop takes on f3 is also possible. Then king to g1, rook to g2 check, king to f1, bishop to c6, rook to c4, bishop to b5, and again pinning the rook and the king. And if king takes, bishop takes on c4, and black is up a whole bishop. A completely winning game for black. So here's the game. Thank you for watching. Okay, so what can we learn from this game is how Fischer managed to turn took advantage, like I said before, took advantage of a little inaccuracy made by his opponent, Grandmaster Herman Pilnik. And here, a series of moves are very accurate. We must always be like Bobby Fischer. Even though we are in a winning position, we need to be careful and not be gobble, or in Malay gelojoh, not to be in rush in winning pieces, but not to win piece, but to get advantage positionally, and which will lead to a winning game, winning pieces. And also if you see here, Fischer is actually down a piece, but he is gaining it back in a few moves. So always play for tactical and for a positional advantage. And here you can see that it will be leading to a winning game. And that is it for now. Thank you for watching Game Analysis 4. Stay tuned and keep study chess.